Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to have Jimmie Muñoz with me here today. Jimmie is the founder and CEO of Passport MX and Passport Destilados, companies dedicated to bridging cultural divides and bringing authentic Mexican experiences to the world. With a deep passion for traditional craftsmanship and heritage, Jimmie has been instrumental in curating and distributing high-quality Mexican spirits like mezcal, tequila, and sotol. His work is driven by a commitment to supporting local producers and fostering cross-border connections. Under his leadership, Passport MX has grown to celebrate and share Mexico's rich cultural legacy with an international audience. Welcome to the show, Jimmie.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me.
There's a lot of great stuff there. I like to start sometimes just giving us a quick snapshot of your business, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So Passport Destilados is a licensed distributor of alcoholic beverages in Arizona. And so what we do is we connect retailers like your favorite bars and restaurants that specialize in agave spirits like tequilas and mezcals with some really interesting and exciting agave variations and agave distillates from Mexico. So these are small batch producers that typically don't produce, in factories. A lot of the time it's in their own private, they're called palenques or vinatas that they produce in. So they're not really the big scale producers. And for them, typically finding the right distributor is a challenge, and finding the process to import into the U.S. And so we help facilitate that, getting their products here into the U.S. market, and helping our friends here in Arizona find some really good agaves-based spirits. So That's what I do. It's a tough job, to be honest with you, but it's worth doing. I feel like I'm doing the Lord's work sometimes.
Okay, excellent. That industry has changed a lot over the past couple decades. A lot of producers there's been just so much on the market and for all sorts of different spirits, but tequila is in particular, there's so many boutique producers nowadays. It's really branched out. And why don't you give us a quick little background on sort of the rules for, the NAM and the tequila appellation and Jalisco and sort of the rules to be tequila versus a sotol and a mezcal, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, the denomination of origin can be pretty hairy for people that aren't dealing with it on a daily basis. One thing that I can refer a lot of folks to that might be familiar with, think about like champagne, right, versus sparkling wine. Champagne needs to be made and produced in a specific region in France versus sparkling wine, which is essentially the same thing, can be produced anywhere. That is an example of denomination of origin. So these protected classes of spirits, and in our case, tequila, and mezcal and bacanora and sotol, all of these guys are getting their own denominations of origin. Basically, what it means for the market and for the consumer is that they know, drinking this product, that it comes from a specific region and is made in a specific way with specific ingredients. So drilling into that, if you're drinking a mezcal and it says mezcal on the label, it tells you that it comes from one of a small number of states in Mexico that are authorized to produce mezcal. Same with tequila, right? A lot of people are familiar with Jalisco being the general region where tequila is from. Mm-hmm. It's not just the region, but in the case of tequila, it must be made with one specific kind of agave. So that's the blue Weber agave. And then it has to be made in a specific way. So typically you're not going to get a smoky tequila because it can't be made in an underground earthen oven and still carry the denomination of origin of tequila. Right. So in our case, what it means for us is that a lot of our producers are, like I mentioned, are a small batch. What that means is that they have been traditionally producing this beverage for generations. Oftentimes we work with third, fourth, fifth generation producers. And most of the time they are in rural areas with limited access to internet, government agencies to submit documentation, knowledgeable people to help guide them through that process. So we step in and try to help them through to get to the point where they're able to export from Mexico, and then ultimately so that they're ready to import into the U.S. And then from there, it's just a matter of getting some product here, sampling it out, and finding the right distributors and retailers for their product. So it's a long, hairy process when it comes to liquors because it is a highly regulated industry. But like I said, it's worth it. It's a lot of fun.
Right. So some of my favorites are the mezcals. To your point, if blue agave isn't necessarily having the best year, because it takes years for them, right, to get those. I mean, I think it could be up to 7 years or more, right, depending. I think of it in like your wine analogy, artisan producers may go, oh, well, these agave are better right now, I'm going to use these instead of those, or something. That they have the flexibility of doing that in different. If they're in Oaxaca or something, they might have different things, performing differently, and so they have the freedom to do that, which I think creates a lot more variety and a lot more a bigger range of product, if not better.
It also introduces so the market loves that kind of stuff because it has something new all the time. And knowing the American side of the market, I'm born and raised here in Phoenix, Arizona. I've traveled a lot around the U.S. I've spent time in numerous cities, villages, and towns all over the U.S. And knowing the market here like I do, but also being able to communicate and reflect the products and traditions of the producers. I'll tell you this, Tim, many lifetimes ago, I was really into archaeology, anthropology, and specifically in Mesoamerica, right? So I still am. I love studying culture. I realized a while ago that it's really hard to make a living doing that. But it was a love and passion of mine, which still carries over to today. And, being able to merge those two things for me is a blessing, right? Because I get to do, on the one hand, what my heart and passion really wants me to do. But on the other hand, I get to connect these people who have carried on this tradition and culture through the generations with the people who are like pining for their products, but find it difficult to get just because of all the red tape that's between them.
Right. So, since you mentioned that, so historically speaking, I think they would ferment. It was like pulque or something, and then when the Latin cultures came in, they started distilling. And then I think there wasn't a lot of change until like the cognac distillers came in. They started, right, mid 1900s or something. They started really aging and things and stuff. Is that right? Am I thinking of it?
Yeah. So there's a lot of emerging science coming out of Mexico and Mesoamerican distillation. There are some findings more recently in like the mountain towns of like Colima and places around like the ridge, right, the Sierra Madre Ridge, where we have vessels that look like they could have been used for distillation. Not the scale that we're talking about now, right? Like a 700 milliliter bottle would have been a heck of a lot of product back then. But they were doing like distilling shots of pulque, right? So they would take the pulque and then
concentrate it.
Like they would boil it, ferment or distill it, and then get a shot of distilled pulque, really.
Oh, interesting.
So there's more evidence to support that distillation to some degree existed here in the Americas prior to colonization.
Okay.
So that's really, really exciting. But on its small scale, it's hard, and really where we're at with it right now, it's hard to really know if to what degree that was pervasive around the region.
Sure.
What we do know was what you mentioned, pulque was and still is the like heart of fermentation in Mesoamerica, right? So for those who may not know about pulque, they take this gigantic agave. It's agave pulquero, so it's named after the pulque. It's very large. Most of the time, they don't uproot the plant because they don't need to distill it. What they'll do is they will essentially cut a niche into the side and remove the juices as needed, right? So every day they'll go out there and kind of harvest these juices. It takes, depending on the weather, takes a day or so, maybe 4 days maximum to ferment in their jar. And then it's a delicious, effervescent drink. Takes a little getting used to. If you haven't tried fresh pulque, definitely try like a fruit variety that they mix it in with like strawberry or like oatmeal or things like that. Try a fruit variety first. It's easier to go down, but it's like so full of like what are they called? Probiotics and vitamins and proteins that it's kind of like it's in and of itself a staple food of Mesoamerica. And a lot of like Mexicanos today, I mean, they drink a lot of pulque.
Huh, really? Okay. I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you don't produce anything yourself?
I wish I did. It would be lovely, but no. I'm a fan of the art and the artists that exist.
Okay. So where does, like, speaking of the smaller ones, mezcals in particular, let's say, like Del Maguey, they kind of started going around originally looking for kind of what you were talking about, right? Little single village mezcals.
I can't speak to specific brands. I don't know their entire, their, what we do though. I can tell you what we do is we do exactly that, right? Like,
okay.
I've spent a lot of time in Mexico and in like the Oaxaca region. I've also explored a few other like regions. For example, like Puebla mezcal is starting to get on the map more now because Oaxaca is just really well known. So more people are kind of branching out to like neighboring states. Puebla and Guerrero, for example, Michoacan have very good mezcal expressions. But basically, it was more like I would go out and just find different producers, basically having a day of driving through the campos to different villages and sampling different product. Now we've got a little bit more sophisticated through our networks and the people that we know, producers, people who work within the Mezcal Regulatory Board, sometimes even like the government agencies. Like, for example, in Oaxaca, it's essentially what we would call a chamber of commerce. For them, it's a government like department that does that. We've through networking become more closely aligned with them, and they're introducing us now to more producers. So because we're exporting, we have to find the ones that are not only good but have some like foundation
volume
what they're doing,
Okay. Like reproducible.
yeah, exactly.
Stable. Okay.
Stable. Yeah, exactly. And not necessarily the volume, but that wherever they're producing, whatever they're using is recognized by the powers that be, so that when it comes time to export, the paper trail exists. And we can
Okay. You can't just go get some really good moonshine somewhere and expect to get that exported.
Yeah, no, not officially. I might bring a couple bottles over in my luggage, but
okay.
Officially speaking, that's different.
So it's also, I mean, to your point, I love this stuff because those the very unique, different processes for making it. So you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I've heard one thing. There's like I think at the Pachuga Festival or something, kind of like the difference when gin, like Bombay versus Bombay Sapphire. Instead Bombay Sapphire, they put a lot of the like the juniper and stuff up high in the still, so that the hot vapors get through it, and it infuses the flavors differently than just boiling it all together in the first place. And they take food from the festival and put it up there, up above. It's some of the different the apparatus, I guess, and part of right. And I swear I could taste some of that in the alcohol, and it was very unique and very special.
Yeah.
Is that accurate to say?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Give you an example. So in mezcal, let's just talk mezcal for a second. That's a pechuga, like you mentioned. And there's different ways to make pechuga, right? You can blend it, which is boiling the contents of the pechuga with the fermented agave juice and then capturing those vapors. But typically the more preferred way, from what I've seen in the mezcal world, is to hang essentially what would be like a cheesecloth in the middle of the still, which is a copper apparatus, right? Then you're hanging it there. And so as the vapors pass, it captures kind of the essence of what's inside of that.
Extracts different chemicals through a different process.
Yeah, exactly. Different biological chemicals, right? Like not artificial, but they're definitely. So it's more of like a vaporized tea, if you will, that ends up going into this bottle. From there, it depends on what is in that pechuga. They may need to filter it out, or they may need to like remove some of the excess, right?
Sure.
But it's picking up in popularity. Pechuga, especially Pechuga de Pavo, has a little bit of tradition behind it, right? That's a way of cooking pavo, which is turkey, inside the still, which gives the turkey a really cool flavor, but also gives the bottle, the liquid, a good flavor. But that's definitely it's an emerging market in the mezcal world. I have a lot more people talking about that and asking me about it, more familiar with it. When I started, sampling mezcal to the American public, that was about 5 or 6 years ago, somewhere around then. And mezcal was a niche product at best. I mean, most people never even heard of it. So it was a lot of education to.
Right. I think there's a worm in it.
Yeah. I was at that step with the worm, and a lot of stuff can have a worm in it. It was a lot of, a lot of conversation and a lot of helping people understand how exactly mezcal is different than tequila. That was like the number one question. Now things like pechuga, there's different kinds of pechuga. For example, one of our producers is doing a pechuga de mango, pechuga de café. So there's coffee in there.
Right.
Doing a pechuga there's another one with pistachios that they're doing. So it adds a little flavor to it. And of course they're more like signature one is the pechuga de pavo. So it's definitely gaining in popularity nowadays. Yesterday I had somebody ask me, or the day before, we were talking about sotol, and that's where I got the question of, oh, isn't that the one with the worm in it? I had sotol one time with the worm in it. And so I guess sotol is now the new taking the place of your mezcal was a while ago.
Okay. So and sotol, for our listeners, is basically closer to a tequila that's just not made in the tequila region. Is that right?
Sort of. You're close.
Okay.
You're getting there. So whereas tequila and mezcal are agave spirits, right?
Okay.
So they're based in agave. Agave grows, they cut it, they make it out of agave. Sotol has no agave. It's not agave based.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. The plant itself is a cousin of the agave plant, but they're not relatives. They're not close relatives. Let's put it that way in the biology world. Okay. I guess in the taxonomy, it's a part of the same family, but different genus.
Okay.
So, but this sotol is made from what we call here in like Arizona area, the yucca plant. Sometimes people call them the century plant. But their taxonomy, at least from the one that we have, is Dicilarian willeri. So it's a desert plant very endemic to the Chihuahua, Coahuila, Texas area of the world.
Okay.
And the plant just grows in the wild there. And so for generations, sotol has been being distilled there as their kind of solution to an agave spirit.
Okay. Where it's kind of a northern Mexican area distillate then? Okay.
Chihuahuan Desert, let's put it that way. Because across the mountain, there's a mountain ridge that divides the Chihuahuan Desert from the Sonoran Desert. Over in the Sonoran Desert, in Sonora, we grow agave. We can grow espadín, angustifolia. So from Sonora, you end up getting bacanora, which is made from an agave, which is agave based. But over in Coahuila and Chihuahua, no agave. It's a drier desert. So the century plant, the yucca plant, grows more endemic there. So the flavor is more full bodied. It's a little grassy. In ours, I taste a little peppercorn, like black peppercorn in there. And then there's a really exciting variety that we have with our Riablo brand, which is spiced pineapple, where they add a little pineapple to it, natural pineapple, and some chiltepin peppers, which are these little red, like chili peppers that are native to the northern part of Mexico. And so you end up, it ends up with a spicy, pineapple-y, delicious, rich flavor. It's hard to describe. You just gotta taste it.
All right. And people can get a chance to taste it, right? Let's jump right to that. Where and how do they get to find these?
So let's see. You can go to the liquor store and get a bottle for yourself. So if you're in the Phoenix area, we're at all 4 Trevor's locations in Phoenix.
Okay.
We're also in the Sotol itself and the Bacanora that I mentioned. I think I did. Or in a liquor store on the west side on 51st Avenue in Thomas called Quick Corner Liquor. That's a really cool spot. And then you can also order online at paradiseliquor.com. So that's how you find our retailers. Well, that's how you find our liquor stores. You can find the other retailers that we have in terms of bars and restaurants and other places to get a cocktail on our website, passportdestilados.com. This Saturday, we're having a sampling at quick corner liquor from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay. Unfortunately for our listeners and viewers, this is the week of Thanksgiving, and we're probably a couple weeks out from airing this episode. Unfortunately,
okay. So go to our website and find out for our next tasting. You can certainly find our next tasting there.
Okay. But speaking of other events, though, you have something brewing. Is that right?
Yeah. So we've been working with some different bars and restaurants in the downtown Phoenix area, advancing the conversation of a more, I guess, street fair kind of bar hop agave experience, right?
Okay. Festival.
Yeah. I mean, a festival kind of connotates like a place,
location,
and right? Like it's more of a day to go around, a weekend to go around the different places that specialize in agave in the downtown Phoenix area and try different agaves that they sell there.
Okay. Like a circuit.
Yeah, something like that. So we're working on that for sometime in the spring of 2025.
Nice.
So I mean, January is kind of early. I think I mentioned January earlier, but I would say about March or April to be on the lookout, like that. There's a really cool one that happens in Tucson, the Agave Festival in Tucson. We don't have anything to do with the planning of that, but it's a really cool festival to go down and experience different agaves and agave expressions. Or it's not by now they've grown to the point where it's not just agave spirits. There's also like dishes that are prepared with agave ingredients. And like so it's more of definitely an agave festival that we would love to not necessarily replicate, but build upon in the Phoenix area. Right? There's a lot of folks here that love that kind of agave culture, and so we're working with some folks to do something cool like that.
Okay, yeah, I don't see a lot of agave foods. That's interesting. You see agave syrup everywhere nowadays, right? Okay. And it's because it's generally a healthier sweetener, right?
Right. Yeah, it's better for the blood sugar. Agave has a long history in Mesoamerica. Aside from pulque and distilling, they've made candy out of the agave, the roots of the agave plant since time immemorial. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
It's very sweet because it's where all the sugar is held. Aside from the bulb, there's roots that go out. So, and then the leaves of the agave, when they bake the heart, so the core of the agave to ferment, they use some of the leaves to like insulate it and keep it from like drying out in the fire. When those leaves are cooked or like baked alongside of the agave, it's a very sweet treat that you can have. And then also the core itself, when you rip off a piece of that's incredibly sweet. You can chew on that. It's kind of like sugar cane. I haven't seen much like by way of items on the menu like that, but I can see some people experimenting here in the valley and doing things like that.
Sure. Now that you mention it, I mean, to my understanding, like I think it's a humidor, right? Who cuts the big pointy leaves off of the agave, and depends upon the maker, but they sometimes use only the core, right? When they make certain tequilas, or sometimes they use the whole thing. Does that vary?
Typically it's the core. Yeah. Okay. The leaves act as like an insulator if they're burying it underground or something like that. But in the case of tequila, it's only the core. They throw those together and bake them.
Okay.
A lot of the time now with tequila, they're using a diffuser, which speeds up the process. It kind of like skips the baking process. But if you ask me, it kind of, the liquid tastes very different than you would get in a traditional bake of agave.
Okay. Speaking of the uniqueness of agave and tequilas and stuff, last I checked, like the 10 most expensive bottles of alcohol ever sold or something, like half of them were tequilas. And I think the most expensive was like some vodka that was in a bottle encrusted in diamonds or something, right? So these bottles are pretty elaborate in and of themselves nowadays. But can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, tequila is on the upswing. Tequilas and mezcals in terms of the beverage market. They've been on an upswing since COVID. And so after somehow in the pandemic, we all found our love for tequila and agave spirits, and we haven't put it down since. We can't quit it. So tequila has overtaken vodka and whiskey as the number one consumed beverage in the United States. So that's great news for tequila producers. Mezcal is growing in popularity and market share quite a bit as well. And I can see why. I mean, the more we know and we learn about the different foods from the new world, right, from here, from this continent, the more we realize that there's different health properties that are better for our bodies than other, grains and things like that. So you mentioned the agave syrup earlier. That's really good for blood sugar. People who have to manage that, it's better to use agave sweetener versus sugar sweetener. We know that. But then when it comes to tequila, right, the body metabolizes the fermented agave in a different way than it does with other grain spirits. So that leads to better health outcomes. I mean, I'm not a doctor. You could probably speak to this a little bit better, but I'm not a medical professional, but I've seen articles and that point to that there are better health outcomes for people who drink agave spirits versus others. And in terms of like popularity, tequila is exciting, right? I mean, there's a lot of different expressions of it, not just with barrel aging, which is definitely like in and of itself a whole community, right? You have different kinds of wood. You have barrels that were formerly wine or whiskey barrels being used for tequila aging. There's a lot of different combinations that you can do with barrels, but then also with the production of it, right? So there's different techniques, like I mentioned, diffusion versus baking. There's different techniques to going about like just juicing the agave, which reveals different flavors. And then different maestros tequileros, the people who produce it, are in and of themselves starting to become more well-known and recognized because of the work that people do in sharing their stories. There's a lot of social media influencers, people who go on and like yourself, podcasters that go on and share these stories. And I think the market is starting to realize that a lot like whiskey has a lot of history behind its production, tequilas and mezcals share that traditional background, and it's a lot you can dive into, right? You can get lost in that rules of production.
Sure. There's a lot of little nuances, family secrets and other stuff too that I when they use the facilities, right? They rent them out for a week or two and they come in with their stuff and their own crew and they do their stuff. Then they, right?
Yeah.
Leave. I will add on to your comment. I've not studied this myself, but I can speak from personal experience, anecdotally, that my body prefers tequila than some alcohols for sure.
Everyone's different. No one is the same when it comes to their metabolism. So for me, and I've noticed like another thing, like tortillas. I'm Latino, I'm Mexican. I eat tortillas pretty much daily, and I've noticed that corn tortillas agree more with my body than flour tortillas, right?
Easily.
I think that probably genetics, right? I have a lot of genes from that in my history. My family's eaten a lot fast, that. But I just studying or just understanding what you eat and how it impacts you, I'd err on the side of tequila as well, Tim.
Actually, what's the saying for the mezcal toast?
Which one?
It's like for all things.
Yes. Para todo mal, mezcal. Para todo bien, también.
Yes. For everything bad, mezcal, and for everything good as well.
Yeah.
Perfect. I love it.
Everything.
Nice. So Passport Destilados. What sets you apart is your unique sourcing of your products. And so if people want to learn more about them, they can go on the website and so forth. I'm definitely going to have to do that, and I'm super excited for you organizing an event showcasing some of these things throughout Phoenix. I'm excited for that. Let's talk a little bit more about your business and challenges you've had to overcome. Can you think of one of the biggest?
Yeah, wow, a lot. Starting a business and being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. Let's put it that way.
No.
There's always a challenge every single day, but rising to that challenge is really the heart and soul of it. I think for me, in forming Passport Destilados, the hardest thing to overcome was the learning curve of distilled spirits and the alcohol industry. It's not easy to get information of how to start your own distribution company, right? In fact, distribution is what we landed on. Originally, I was trying to basically create my own mezcal brand, like start a label. It's called the industry.
Okay.
And then import that label and then get it connected with, distributors and retailers. And after months of painstaking research, realized that it was probably better to work with other brands that were already being produced and help them enter into the market than it was going to be to do my own brand and kind of pigeonhole myself. So the learning curve took a lot of time. Honestly, it was something that I had to prepare. I was not prepared for, but what's that law? It's Hofstadter's law, I think it is, that everything is going to take more time than you think it will. Right?
Okay. Good. Right.
When I set out to do this, it was, we'll get a license real quick and we'll start moving. And
right.
It was about a year and a half to 2 years later when we got the license.
Oh, wow. Right. Yeah. The U.S. doesn't mess around with some of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's more of, it's either you've got to use the time to learn how to do it yourself, or you can do the shortcut and pay through the nose.
Pay for speed. Okay. Fast track it. I do have a friend who started his own, made his own label and marketing and stuff. Do you know Corcel?
Name doesn't ring a bell.
Corcel. There's like a horse on the label. They have their, Blanco, Reposado, and Anejo. He has a couple other things as well. Anyway, buddy of mine, Esteban Magana. He used to, I used to golf and fish with him a lot. He's an anesthesiologist. He used to work with my wife. So,
right on.
He's here in the Valley.
He launched his own tequila brand.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we actually help a lot of people do that ourselves. Because producers, in addition to producing their own, they can also produce, it's, the maquilado, it's special label, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, we do that a lot. And especially for, like special events, people are getting married or, anniversaries, corporate events, things like that. Just doing a one-off run. You'd be surprised that the paperwork to get that to happen is a lot easier than getting an actual producer registered to.
Sure.
But it's an exciting market, man. And I think business-wise, so I've been self-employed now, I guess, entrepreneurial minded for the past 20 years or so.
Okay.
For me, it's the excitement of waking up and doing something that I want to do and that I know I have to do. There's definitely a lot of excitement. I get a kick out of these commercials that you see sometimes of like, be your own boss. And then the visual is like a guy with his feet up on the desk. And, I'm like, I'd put my feet up on the desk if I could find room on my desk.
Right.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And what I tell people who, when we have conversations about doing their own thing, launching their own company, is to be prepared in that you not only the boss has all the responsibility, right? What employees don't see is that while they're doing their work and advancing their portion of the company, the boss is taking on the responsibility of making sure people are getting paid, bills are getting paid, the doors are open, that customers are satisfied. If you're in the unfortunate situation where you have to, handle a discrepancy or something that goes wrong, now you have legal things you got to worry about that employees just in general aren't aware of, right? So being your own boss means that now you open the curtain and you can see what really goes on the other side. And you've got to take all that on yourself too. So
a lot more stress and responsibility for sure.
Yeah. It has its benefits, right? Like you can set your own schedule.
Right.
You
don't have somebody yelling at you, but you're yelling at yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when you go to check the mail some weeks, you're like, oh God, okay, let's see what's in here. That's the boss's stress versus the employee, right? So I think when I first set out to do my own thing, making that jump was exciting, but also a learning curve in and of itself.
Sure. It's scary and it has risks associated with it and all sorts of other challenges.
Yeah. So you got to be a lifelong learner. You got to know that you don't know it all. And every day you're going to learn something new and you got to be okay with that.
For sure. Great point. So let's talk about the future of the company. Do you have sort of a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year goals?
Yeah. So we've gotten to the point now where like I was mentioning earlier, we're working with like the equivalent of the Chamber of Commerce and the like associations and things like that. There are a few associations in Mexico that they do what we do, right? They work with small batch producers. They kind of foment the ancestral knowledge, the innate knowledge of production. And so something that we want to do is find ways to work more closely together with them. In the case of a couple, there's like a nonprofit that does that. It's like a co-op over there that basically gives them a space to be able to produce their products. Because like you mentioned earlier, like going into a place and bringing your crew and doing this, that takes resources, right? You have to have the equipment and not just the equipment, the materials to do that. But also you got to have the people, which is a resource in and of itself, a very valuable one. So we're working with them to kind of foment more of that knowledge. So it may be that our company starts doing some philanthropic work, like on the side, like with some aligned philanthropic organization here that does that. And then in terms of like of growth for the company, what I think is I'm soundboarding you. So something that I'm considering, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this from someone who's talked to a lot of business owners themselves. The traditional way of bringing products in has been you figure out what products you want for your portfolio, you buy them, you get them in your portfolio, and then you sell them, right? That's the typical way business works. What I'm thinking of doing is democratizing that, if you will, bringing in a smaller batch of these spirits, organizing some kind of event where people try various different spirits, and then somehow voting with your dollars, right? Kind of doing like a crowdfunding game where in order to start the process of getting this variety across the border, it costs, I don't know, $20,000. So now it's, people either buying into something or becoming a member of this group that supports this brand to bring more of that, to foment more of that brand in the US. So, we're starting to figure out how to structure that in a corporate sense, right? Whether they're going to be like low-level securities or some kind of bond or, I don't know, some kind of royalty or something like that. Starting to kind of brainstorm that so that we can launch that. Hopefully, if we are able to do the agave event in the spring, we can tie it into something like that where people are trying new things at different places and then voting with their dollars, if you will, to get that product.
Sure. I like that. I like whenever you can reverse engineer and follow demand, right? I'm a big fan of that. And versus just bringing in a product you like and expecting your market to want it as well. That's never a good philosophy. It's trying to find their problem and solve it, right? And figure out what the demand is first. So yeah, I like that model.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, is finding the demand. Because before spirits, I was in travel, and I also kind of would have these get-togethers where I would book travel for people, but I would bring like artisanal crafts and stuff like that to kind of reflect the culture of where we're thinking about traveling to. And that taught me that getting people to touch and feel and look at things and smell things, getting more tactile with it, animates them to want to go and close the deal, if you will. So I think getting into people's hands is really, really important, but then having some kind of call to action beyond like buy a bottle, right? Like that's a very typical call to action. Of course, yeah, you can buy a bottle, but to become part of team, tequila, whatever, right? That's a deeper step that I think a lot of people are willing to take. So yeah, we're just trying to figure out the structure of that, how that actually is going to work. Maybe a membership or something like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good. Yeah. That's exciting stuff. You have a lot of options there. I think you'll some of those will pan out for sure. This is a question I like to ask people on the show. It's a reflection question, right? What do you wish you would have known sooner about building wealth and success in your career?
Oh boy. Let's see. Everything. Let's see. There's so much, Tim. I can say this. Spirits is a social business, right? typically you drink with other people. All right.
Okay.
What I've come into more now than I did previously is the comfort of confiding with select people in my network about business, talking with them, spitballing, sharing ideas, because even if that one individual themselves can't help you, the more you put out your thoughts and your desires, your desired direction, the more likely people will, like through degrees of contact, will come forward to help. So something I wish I would have known earlier was to build my network more methodically and to use that network in kind of unofficial capacities to advance official objectives, right? And I learned that through going to I do things now that I never would have done in the past. For example, the Chamber of Commerce meetings, right? In the past, I would look at those, roll my eyes and be like, next. On. Yeah. But now, now that I sell spirits, I've discovered that the networking mixer, you get together, you drink and you meet people. In the past, I'd say, what's the value in that? I need to go make some money. But now in my older years, my wiser years, being able to recognize this group of people, not just as like leads and prospects, but also as like potential friends and people I can confide in about business things to kind of advance together our goals, our shared goals.
Right.
And there's just so much of that out there. I mean, beyond the chambers, right? Just getting involved. Sorry about that. Getting involved in community events or community organizations, things like that. It's immensely helpful, and it pays dividends that you may not recognize immediately, but down the line you'll think, "Wow, I'm so glad I met so and so." And you think, "How did I meet this person?" Oh, it's because I met this other person from this other event in passing, and then all of a sudden now I'm like besties with
not necessarily a structured mastermind, but it was just the effects of just maybe even just the cultural work and you're doing here in Phoenix, and the impact you're having by growing your network and connecting people.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, there's a blogger, I forget her name. I should bring it up. She says your net worth is your network.
Right.
And it's so true. It wish I would.
Millions. Yes. Yep, for sure. All right. Jimmie, if people want to connect with you, what should they do?
Definitely find me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message there. You can find me on Instagram. My LinkedIn is real cut and dried, Jimmie Muñoz. But definitely find me on social media. That's the best way to connect with me. You can also go to our website and put in a contact us form, but definitely just reach out to me on social media. I try to be as engaging as possible.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching. Thank you very much to Jimmie Muñoz for joining me today. We appreciate you sharing all of your story and your insights into success and spirits.
Thank you. Well, come on down and try and get a sip one of these days.
That's definitely happening. Okay. Looking forward to it.
All right, Tim.
Thank you.
Inspired by our guests? Visit PhoenixProsperityPodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.